Thank you, and we'll call the meeting to order.
Thank you,
This is reconvening of the special meeting on the budget of the Strategic Priorities Administration and Protective Services Standing Committee, which incorporates all of Council. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have indeed been involved in that meeting for the past day and a half, and I'm pleased to say we're arrived at our final presentation. And we do save the best for last. So,
but we've run out of money, so don't ask for anything.
I'd like to invite Ms. Lori McKay to come forward to speak to the Parks, Recreation and Cultural Services budget.
Thank you very much. And so I am here today to present the 5-year financial plan for Parks, Recreation and Culture Services. I do have a presentation with details, but I'll try and keep it at a high level. I know you all have very detailed binders and you've been studying them for quite some time. So I'll sort of leave my remarks to a summary level, and staff are here to answer any questions that I expect you'll have following our presentation. So I'll basically give an overview of the department. Many of you are very aware of the services we provide, but I'll summarize them again for our guests in the audience. I'll also highlight our accomplishments from 2010, do some forward projections around our priorities and challenges next year, and then get into our 2011 financial plan. So you see before you, of course, our new structure for the department, organized into 3 divisions. We have 278.8 full-time equivalent staff, very, very qualified staff who work very hard and are dedicated to the work that we do. This number actually for 2011 is down from the previous year, and much of those efficiencies have come out of a lot of hard work and examination and our cyclical review and some realignment within the city. So we believe that we're well positioned and very accountable for very effective services moving forward. Within the administration, the general manager's area, there are 2 staff, myself and my executive assistant, Liz, who many of you have the opportunity to work with. In parks and facilities, we've got 107 full-time equivalents. They take care of all of the physical parks and recreation assets, as well as the inventory of trees. They do the day-to-day maintenance of all of our properties, planned and periodic maintenance programs for our facilities, our outdoor sports services, including working with our outdoor sports groups, construction and project management for our parks and facilities, and cemetery services. In recreation, they're responsible for our community recreation programming at Dogwood and Centennial and Pine Tree, Glen Pine, Summit, and Poirier. They also operate our major leisure facilities, the new Poirier Sport and Leisure Complex and the City Centre Aquatic Centre. They, on a day-to-day, liaise with our indoor user groups, and they also are our liaison to the Boxing Commission. And 364 days a year and up to 16 hours a day, they liaise with our individual citizen patrons that use our facilities through registrations and swimming and local community groups that use our many facilities. Our new division, the Program Development, Culture and Business Support Division, there's 49 staff dedicated in that area, and they're responsible for all our parks and leisure planning and design studies, our community consultation processes, policy development work, our centralized administrative functions, including our finance and marketing and bookings and registration systems, and our performance measurement system. They lead the implementation of the new cultural strategic plan and work with our cultural service groups. They also administer the filming and special events in the city, and together with our corporate services department, administer the civic funding program for the grant programs. They also are responsible on a citywide basis for the volunteer management program. The next slide starts to give you highlights of our accomplishments in 2010. And 2010 was a very successful year for the department and a very busy year. We've organized these accomplishments along the strategic goals that the city has established. And first of all, in the area of strengthening neighborhood neighborhoods. Our department works a lot with volunteers, and you can see just within the recreation services area, 662 volunteers were involved, and you can see the hours that they invested into our work. That's an average of 103 hours for every volunteer. So that really shows the level of commitment that we have. That is up from last year. It's a 32% increase in the number of volunteers and a 23% increase in the number of hours that each volunteer contributed. For our tree planting initiatives in 2010, in total, 4,796 trees and native shrubs were planted, primarily with the use of volunteers again. In that area, 620 volunteers gave over 2,000 volunteer hours for planting and invasive removal areas. The area that was removed was actually 8,350 square meters of land that was maintained at a number of different sites. We also had some community beautification initiatives here. Of course, the Echo sculpture in front of the Poirier Library, the Joy of Reading was installed this year, and I know everyone in the city is looking forward to the launching of the fountain in Lafarge Lake later this year. And public art in Mayardville, the new piece that was we just celebrated the grand opening on October the 23rd. It's called Pioneer Spirit, and it was commissioned to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Mayardville. In the area of increasing active participation and creativity, this certainly was a year of community celebrations, and we reached a new level in terms of the quality of our events and the numbers of participants. The torch relay, of course, was a historic moment for us on February 11th, and 25,000 plus participants were engaged in that, and I think you heard about how many of the other community organizations that you heard from this morning were engaged in that success as well. Canada Day 2010, it was our second event. This is a civic event that is actually organized by the city, one of the few ones that is, and a real growth in the program to over 20,000 participants. In that one, and in response to questions previously that Council has raised, we actually engaged 188 volunteers from various community groups in the delivery of that event this year. Spirit Square, we had the trial program there, and lots of learning and success there, and Council recently received a report with recommendations as it relates to ongoing program in Spirit Square for 2011. The Cultural Services Strategic Plan was an important planning document that was adopted in 2010 by Council and really sets the stage for a lot of work to come with our cultural sector over the next 5 to 10 years. In terms of dogs off leash, we opened Monday off leash area on October the 17th. And our ongoing participation in all of our core programs that continue year in and year out. You can see the numbers there for the number of hours of participants in our registered programs so far this year, at least up to the end of September. Our pavilion members were over 4,000. That is an increase of 4% over last year. Our town centre park usage also continuing to grow, and actually it was a very significant increase this year of 39% over previous years. So people have definitely discovered town centre park, and participation continues to grow. And you can see also our admissions, they are very stable in our swimming, skating, and weight room programs. In the area of enhancing sustainability of city services and infrastructure, of course, the department is responsible for quite a significant inventory of lands and infrastructure. You can see the numbers before you in terms of our acres of parks and trails. These facilities are about the best deal that citizens have, in that they are available 365 days a year, all times of the day and up until dusk. and they're used by both casual and organized users very heavily, and of course at no or minimal charges. We have significant street trees in our inventory, over 10,000, 76 sports fields and ball diamonds, and 93 kilometers of trails and walkways. This year, of course, we also worked very collaboratively with other departments for the successful commissioning of Poirier Sport and Leisure Complex, kept it opened while it was under construction, and celebrated the grand opening on October 30th. In terms of capital construction projects, there was $5.8 million of work done in 2010 on a whole range of facilities, including our washroom upgrade program and a new washroom at Victoria Park. Of course, the Percy Perry Stadium roof and track replacement. And I'm very pleased to say that today it opens to the public, finished. The track now completely finished. Monday 4, sports field lighting. Spirit Square, library roof, which was not originally on the work plan, but a critical piece of infrastructure that needed to be repaired this year. Playground replacements at Coquitlam and Robson. The Mundy Park picnic shelters. I hope by now you've seen the new structures. They're being very well received by the community, and the old structures will be removed. And an investment in Spaney Pool with upgrading that facility this year. We did a number of plans this year in terms of Mackin Park, and Council will be very soon receiving the concept plan for that. We just had an open house October the 14th. Glen Park, we've been in the design phase with that this year. The city centre dog off leash area, and we will be also reporting to Council on that before year end. And work in the Northeast concept plan. And just Friday night, the city was recognized in Victoria with a BCLNA Environmental Stewardship Award, and we're inviting them to come to Council in the near future to come and present that to all of Council. In terms of our highlights and accomplishments in terms of achieving excellence in city governance in 2010, this is the behind-the-scenes work that helped make the department effective and the services seamless to our citizens. But we processed 13,000 work orders, both for parks and facility repairs. We worked with School District 43 and specifically jointly with them applied for a grant to create a dividing wall at Summit School to increase the community programming potential there. We leveraged grants from outside sources to the tune of $1,125,000. 358 plus was used for operating grants that helped to expand our services in terms of summer employment grants, the Echo Yard Smart program, tree planting days, the torch relay celebration, BC walking program, Jumpstart program, and many other examples. Also on the capital side, we leveraged over $700,000 in capital grants, and that was specifically the rink grant for the stadium track and roof. In 2010, there was a lot of inward looking at the department itself and how we could become more effective, and we completed the department cyclical review and are into our transition phase, and we'll be reporting out at the end of the year on our progress on that transition. We worked on the establishment of the Sports Council and the Cultural Advisory Council, and both of those are in their initial meeting stages this fall. We, of course, were very happy to be part of bringing Coquitlam Express back to Coquitlam and negotiating a successful agreement with them to call Coquitlam home after their 5-year absence. And working with our fire chief, brought to you the idea of creating a smoking ban in parks, one of the leaders in the Lower Mainland to introduce that as a major safety initiative for our city. Now thinking about 2011, again, along the lines of the city's strategic priority, we're very much looking forward to 2011. And for us, after 2010 and all of our focus areas, 2011 for us is about stabilizing our new normal and increasing our effectiveness and sustainability long term. The key priorities are the development of a citywide parks, recreation, and culture plan, and the Northeast development, and advancing the work on the public art program plan. In terms of active participation and creativity, we are going to put a priority on increasing after-school program opportunities. We'd like to see a 10% increase there in 2011. We'd like to see an expansion in our youth council. We are experiencing more interest from youth in getting involved in this, and we want to lead and participate with them in that. Canada Day, this will be year 3 for Canada Day, and we're projecting a 20% increase in attendance for 2011. We also will continue with our investment in infrastructure and park development. And I'm showing this slide here in slightly different format. Previous years you've sort of seen a shopping list and you see a lot of names of parks and names of projects, and they all go through sort of phases of work, and it often takes many years for them to go through this until you actually see a shovel in the ground, or even better yet, you see the grand opening. So you can see the projects that we'll be focusing on in 2011 and sort of what stage of development they'll be at for next year. Enhancing the sustainability of city services and infrastructure, we'll continue with the park washroom upgrade program. That's an ongoing program, and our focus next year will be the installation of a new facility at Hickey, a replacement facility at Como Lake. We're working with School District 43 on a proposal for a new facility at Miller Park School as part of the seismic upgrade program that the school district is doing. And we're looking at upgrades at Blue Mountain Park and Monday Park. And the Facilities Condition Assessment Program is a large program that will actually take 3 years to do, but we would start in 2011, which is to gather data for life cycle planning for structural, mechanical, electrical, and building envelope for all of our city infrastructure. Achieving excellence in city governance, we need to focus in 2011 on our recruitment and training. We've had a number of retirements happen in 2011, and our cyclical review has created some new jobs in the department, and so we want to be sure that we are recruiting the best and the brightest and training them up for a long and successful career with Coquitlam. We'll continue to focus on our emergency social services and invest more in our training exercise plan next year. The accountability measures for grant programs, this is something that Council has requested us to begin to look at, and we'll start to refine what that might look like in 2011. And we'd like to improve our online information and services. We already have citizens accessing some of our services through the website, but we believe there's more potential there. Working with our communications in terms of our website content and improving our online registration options and membership renewal options. Additional to this, and rather late breaking in our business planning cycle, but the BC Ministry of Health Services has just released their new swimming pool regulations, which is going to require us to develop a pool safety plan by October of next year. So we'll need to incorporate that into our business plans as well for both of our swimming pools. Now on to the money, the budget. You see before you our 2011 summary. The budget has a total expenditures of almost $27 million. We generate just over $8 million in revenue for a net expenditure of $18,876,000. This represents a tremendous value for citizens of Coquitlam. On a per capita spending by household, it averages out to $267 per household. That's actually 4% lower than all of our neighboring municipalities, and 5% lower than our neighboring municipalities, and 4% lower for the Metro Vancouver average. So we believe that we provide very good value to our citizens. Our recovery rate is 30%, and that is the relationship between the revenues that we have coming in versus our expenses. That recovery rate is down 1% from last year. The reason for the change is that our revenues coming in are not increasing the same rate as the labor increases that have been negotiated. Our labor costs actually represent 71% of our operating budget, and that is up 1% from last year. On the expenditure side now, it starts to get into a little more detail. I'm not going to spend too much on this because, again, I know it's in your binder, but it gives you a bit of a picture around where a lot of our money goes in expenditures, and the next slide will be where it's coming in revenues. But you can see, looking at this slide, that a lot of money is spent in direct service of delivering parks and facilities, as well as recreation. Less money is spent in the support functions around program development, culture and business support, and administration is a rather small part of our budget. Next slide on the revenues. You can see most of our revenues are coming in our recreation services, and these represent the program fees that we charge for things like swimming lessons, skating lessons, bus trips, and things like that, and our drop-in admissions for skating and swimming. The next slide. This is something Council had asked for in previous years, so I've repeated it again, and it gives an idea of how we subsidize various services. You see on the right-hand side a recovery rate of how much fees come in to recover the cost of the services, and down below you see a sample of different facility services that we offer. So the first two are Glen Pine and Dogwood, and you can see that the citizens of Vancouver are subsidizing those significantly. They recover between 38% and 43% of their costs. The next two examples show you our swimming pools, CCAC and Chimo Pool, and those are recovering 60 to 66% of the costs. Outdoor pools, significantly less, 36 and 33%. And Pine Tree, a typical community center, recovers about 43%. Arenas are slightly higher at 48%. And outdoor sports is about 11%. And these reflect the range of policies and practices and services that the city has decided to provide. And the city enjoys a high level of citizen acceptance and appreciation and approval for the services that it provides. Once again, our Ipsos Reid survey indicates a range of satisfaction levels in excess of 90%. For our parks and trails, and again, high 90s for our recreation services, and 89% for our sports services. Next slide. This department, similar to every other department, has been asked to come up with a range of options that, if it's necessary to look at reductions, what are some options that Council may wish to consider. So you have before staff suggestions here. The first item around scheduling efficiencies is the area where we have the largest number of ideas. Reducing our budgeted overtime across the department. We have been looking at this now for over a year, and we have been managing our emergency overtime costs by doing a better job in scheduling of our auxiliary hours so that emergency overtime is not necessary. There's no question that overtime is the most expensive way to get work done, and we are looking to minimize emergency overtime. Reducing our vacation backfill. Our staffing and service realignment as a result of our cyclical review has mitigated the need to always have vacation coverage. We've centralized some kinds of services where it is easier to do that kind of coverage without automatically having to backfill. So we feel we can make some savings there. The Poirier precinct itself, now that it is fully operational, we are identifying some potential operating efficiencies there. As you know, we have the Poirier complex, but right across the street we have a community center, and we also have Dogwood, and we also have Centennial rooms. So 4 buildings, and sometimes in looking at the scheduling we can find some efficiencies where we don't need to have staff coverage at all 4 buildings. We could perhaps relocate programs and be more efficient in our staff deployment. And in reduction of facility support budget for the Innovation Center, previously the Innovation Center was a customer service center for City Soup, and you may recall that we've made changes in that area, so we don't have the public accessing that facility to the same frequency, and so we're able to reduce our costs for staff support at that building. The next category in terms of actual service reductions. The first one is a discontinuation of the urinal treatment system for city facilities. I realize we're getting quite into the nitty-gritty here, but majority of our facilities now have auto flush systems, and so it's not necessary to spend $11,000 putting urinal pucks in anymore. We can discontinue that with no noticeable difference to customers. The next idea is in the weight room supervision. This is specific to the Pine Tree Community Center, where we have a small weight room, and we find that there are times that are very low usage, and in our mind it may not be affordable to continue to provide a dedicated weight room attendant during those low usage times. We also find that most of our patrons do the right thing. They use the equipment appropriately. They have appropriate behavior. It's not necessary for us to be standing there every hour. We feel that our staff can do weight room checks as part of their regular facility checks, and we're able to save $7,000 if we make that change. The next idea is reducing operating hours at times when user visits typically decline, and this we're talking about our facilities like our community centers. In the summer, a lot of the action goes outdoors. Our parks are really, really busy. Our wading pools and outdoor pools are very, very busy. Some of the facilities get a little bit quieter. And we think that at the City Center Aquatic Complex, we could close 1 hour earlier during the summer, closing at 9:30 instead of 10:30. That would save $4,000. Same strategy at Chimo Aquatic and Fitness Center, closing at 9 p.m. instead of 10 p.m. would save $4,000. At Glen Pine Pavilion, we're open during the summer on Saturdays for 6 hours. We feel that if we're only open for 4 hours on Saturdays, we could save $1,800. And extending the annual maintenance closure at the City Center Aquatic Complex. Each year, the pools do have to have a maintenance shutdown to do major maintenance. And during that time, of course, our full-time staff take vacation if they're not needed to actually do the maintenance activities. If we extended that annual maintenance by 1 week, we would save $16,500. Annual maintenance times are inconvenient times for our patrons, but they do know, and we do schedule so that they can use other facilities at that time. If we extended it by 1 week, it would represent savings to the city. And finally, in terms of reduction ideas, we currently have a contractor to do graffiti removal. That was a program that was escalated a number of years ago, and because of significant graffiti problems that we were having, we've noticed that the graffiti is reducing, and if we were to discontinue the use of a contractor for that, we could have the graffiti removal done by our work crews as part of their regular work, and it would represent a savings of $10,000. So in total, those service reduction ideas total $54,300. Finally, on the revenue side, we believe that we do work on a recoverable basis for other groups. So they ask for services, they've determined we're the best provider and the cheapest provider, and we provide that on a recoverable basis. But we've not been charging for our overhead time or administrative time to process work orders, and and do inspections and things like that. So this would be a new charge for any of our recoverable worker orders that we would include our direct overhead costs. And then what's not on this slide, but I believe was reported to you yesterday, is each department has been asked to look at their consulting budget, and of course our department would share in that overall reduction of consulting services. That's it on the reduction side. In the new request area, we have identified a number of areas. The first on the revenue side relates to fees and charges. And you may recall last year the whole fees and charges issue was put into the budget process. So you have a section in your binder with the fees and charges recommendations for this year. In that report, it identifies the potential to increase revenues by $10,000, and the proposal includes the basic inflationary increase of 1% and some adjustments to fees that are subject to our policy around calculating averages. There are new fees proposed in that document around youth outdoor event fees. This would be a fee for events that are not part of the regular league play, where of course no fee applies. So things like tournaments or developmental camps that are happening, a $3 per hour field has been recommended. We also have suggested a new fee for underutilized artificial field rentals. Our experience has found that because we don't have a charge for youth groups on fields, that sometimes reservations are made that it turns out are not actually needed for play. And so we're recommending a $25 fee be established for non-use of artificial fields. The intent here is not actually to collect the fees, but to ask that the groups that use the fields to cancel the bookings that they don't actually need for their use, that would allow the city to book the fields for other users. We do have a waiting list for the use of fields, and of course if it's reserved we can't book it out to another group, and then they find that it's actually not being used, and so they're disappointed and we're not getting the maximum utilization of the asset. Other items in that fees and charges document include fees for new amenities that are now available for rental because of the Poirier Sport and Leisure Complex. We have looked at our banquet type facilities that we have found generally across the Lower Mainland usage is declining. We are proposing a 20% discount rate for the non-prime times in order to encourage more utilization. And we've also recommended a bank service charge offset. We found more and more these expensive cards that people have that have premium benefits that go on with it. We're getting hit with significant bank service charge to process those specialty cards, and that cost needs to be offset by the revenues. So lots of things in the fees and charges report. It represents collectively quite nominal increases. For example, for an adult admission, it would go up 4 cents. For a pool rental for a youth indoor group, it would be a 1% increase. A pavilion membership would go up 28 cents. Youth ice rental would go up 1%. So quite nominal. Other new requests are the Canada Day celebration. Oh, I'm sorry, I believe I skipped over something, Jay. Thank you. Operating costs that are included in the submission that relate to previous council decisions, there are 3 of them. The Cultural Advisory Committee, the Pipeline BMX facility, and on that one you may recall there used to be a community group that maintained that facility, and that group disbanded. And the third is the Sports Council. The next slide on service enhancement requests, Canada Day celebration, and that was the subject of a recent report to Council. And on that, it's a $95,000 request, and it is to establish a permanent funding for the Canada Day celebration. Again, I'll remind Council our goal is to increase attendance 20% over the 20,000 people that we had participating last year. For the arena maintenance, this is a temporary request, and it's driven by BC safety regulations. The BC Safety Act requires that we provide 24-hour operation of the refrigeration plant at this time. That's been in place actually through much of 2010, and we have been required to do that on overtime because our budget doesn't provide for staff to be able to provide that. We have applied to be risk assessed, and when the province, or if the province decides that we are risk assessed, we will be able to reduce it down to the level that we would expect it to be, but we're not there yet. We can't control that. That's up to the province to do that risk assessment and to approve us. Our next opportunity for an inspection is in February, and again, until such time, we have to continue to staff it 24 hours a day, and we're having to do that on overtime right now. Because of this regulatory requirement, we've already had to spend $21,000 in overtime expenses to meet this requirement based on the written orders that we received from the BC Safety Act. So this may well be a temporary situation if we are risk assessed in 2011. However, it's prudent for us to identify this for you because it's unknown at this time if we will be risk assessed. And obviously, if we are, this will no longer be required and it would be eliminated from our budget. The Spirit Square event programming, that was also subject of a recent report to Council. It represents $28,000. And the street tree watering and replacement program, this is an enhancement request to water the new trees that are planted an extra 2 years beyond our current 3-year watering period. Our current standard when we plant a new street tree is that we will water it for the first 3 years. Recent trends that are calling for more significant drought periods during the summer has resulted in trees that have been in the ground 4 or 5 years showing signs of drought stress, and in some cases these trees are dying. If Council wished to extend that program an additional 2 years, it would represent a cost of $28,500. On the capital side, this gives you an idea of the distribution of the capital program for the 5-year period. It represents significant investment, particularly in parks facilities. At the bottom, the park purchasing, this is our park acquisition program for 5 years, so you can see it represents the largest investment over the next 5 years. Moving to the left, the park development at 8.1 is obviously the development of both new parks and the existing inventory of parks. You can see the trail program at $800,000 and our planting program at $500,000. Facilities is only representing $2.8 million of our capital program over the next 5 years, and that takes care of our seismic upgrade program and facility repair and replacement. And then sports represents $4.2 million, and that is our sports field strategy program, our sport court program, centralized irrigation controls included. Here's the detail, but again, it's all in your binders. And that concludes the Parks and Recreation presentation of the 5-year financial plan. The next slide represents the top facility priorities that were identified by Council, but I believe we'll treat that as a separate discussion. So at this time, thank you for your attention. I know it's a lot of information, but I'm certainly available to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Zakora has activated his button.
Okay, thank you. You're cutting the pool hours in the Coquitlam Center for a pool. That, you know, to me, cutting services like that are just doesn't give me no appetite on that. I think that, the way taxes have been going up, people are going to be saying, you're upping my taxable lot and cutting services. And you can't have both, either or. So, you mentioned, pool servicing. I noticed that you closed the pool for servicing in September, when it should be probably closed in July, August, the indoor pool, while there's outdoor pools that are open. But don't close the outdoor pools and the indoor pools at the same time for servicing. I think that it's a wrong time to do. On that, full-time employee or the full-time guard or whatever it is to see that the equipment in arena is working 24 hours a day. I mean, if you get paid overtime, sure to God you can hire an employee to be in there and forget about the overtime. I mean, there's certainly a lot of people looking for work. So that's the thing. Another thing that I noticed while I was there.
While we're here, if you have any responses to any of these, I assume some of these things you've already considered, because I know you to be a pretty good manager.
If I may, as it relates to the last one around the rink, there is actually a shortage of qualified engineers for rinks across the province. This is a difficulty in recruiting. These are certified individuals, and we did put out a call for qualified applicants. It's a limited pool, and they can pretty well go out wherever they want right now. So it is a real challenge, and it's part of our need to focus on recruiting and training. We may need to be training some of our own people so that we have a larger pool of qualified people to draw on. As it relates to the pool scheduling, we do schedule our pool closures across the whole system, looking at our peak demand times. September actually is a little bit of a quieter time. It really starts to ramp up when the lesson program gets going. You know how September is sometimes the beginning of the year for many families. They sort of get settled in school, and then they get into all of their organized activities. And so the swimming lessons and whatnot start a little bit later in September, so we want to make sure we do our closures before we have that big bubble of registrations coming in, and we do have outdoor pools still open at that time. So we do coordinate to balance off to maximize the opportunities for citizens and have the most swimming facilities open at any given time. And as it relates to closing pools, it is hard, and I'm sure you've heard from every other general manager as well. Nobody likes to look at service reductions, but we've been in a challenging time over the last number of years. We've had to look at trimming wherever we can, and we're trying to find what's left that has the minimal impact on citizens, but of course any reduction does have an impact. It's a matter of choosing around priorities.
Well, I certainly didn't know that it takes specialized people to look after the pool during the after hours, so where the overtime comes in. But the Spadey pool was closed at the same time when outdoor pools were closed. Were closed this last year, and I got a lot of calls on that. The people were complaining.
And as far as Spadey goes, of course, we work very closely with our swim club in terms of finding a time that was not going to interfere with their special activities around their 50th anniversary. So again, there's never an optimal time to close. These services are very valued, and I know councillors get a lot of questions when things have to be closed. But maintaining our infrastructure for the long term is an important priority for the city. Citizens have invested a lot, and we do have to close them at periods of time in order to do necessary repairs in order to extend their life. And that one was done with a lot of community consultation to find a time that when there was other outdoor pools that were available to citizens and where we could still have the special events around the swim club.
And I noticed that, you contract out the food in the swimming pool and the Coquitlam's rather on Poirier Street, and yet there doesn't show any income from on the lease. And this, is it Nest or is it somewhere else in some other binder that I should be looking at?
The detail on that is in our budget information, and I would look to Ms. Hare to gather that detail.
Yeah, okay, that's good. And also, you know, I noticed that when I was there, you had the beer garden that was open, and yet the beer garden didn't belong to us. It belonged to the contractor that contracted the food out, and yet we put our own guards in there to see that the underage kids weren't going in there. So, you know, what I'm saying, if you're going to save, there was, I think, 3 or 4 guards on the night that I was there stopping everybody. Or you had to have a wristband on if you're going in the garden. If you didn't have to go in the garden, you didn't. And there was 4 guards. Now, how much money did that cost us, you know? I mean, it should be the contractor that's paying that rather than us.
Yes, I think you're referring to the summer lacrosse event.
Yeah.
And yes, our third-party operator operates the food and beverage, and we hold the license, and we have to make sure that we comply with all of the rules around serving that. The actual event was organized by a lacrosse group, and their responsibilities were included managing their minors that were participating in the event, and we noticed together that there were some inconsistencies around how people were accessing the beer garden. So some controls needed to be put in place, and so there was an appropriate response around increasing security as well as identifying people who were able to go into that area. So it was about controlling and making sure that there was no underage access into the beer garden.
So who's paying for the guards?
That charge would actually go to the tournament organizers. That is related to the operation of their tournament. I believe in this year we actually absorbed that cost as a city because it was an extraordinary event.
I think that your contractor, that we have the food contractor out to, it's his liquor, it's his contract, and he should be paying for the security guards. It shouldn't be the city. Why would I pay for something that somebody else has leased out?
In terms of security, that's not part of our agreement with the food and beverage, but it is part of our agreements with any major events that come into the venue. They need to have a security plan, just like they have to have a traffic management plan. Every event is different, and it has slightly different security needs. And so it's part of their responsibilities as an event coming into this public facility that they need to demonstrate. And I believe Council has asked us to work with all of those event organizers to make sure that they have an adequate security plan in place.
But I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying that, you know what, if there's a lot of these kind of events, maybe what we're gaining from the contracting out the food, maybe we're losing at the end money rather than making money. So that's my comments, okay? But another thing that here you have, you know, every committee that you have, Sports Council and Cultural Advisory Committee and everything, get $20,000 for the meetings. You know, you got 3 of them, that's $60,000. Now, cannot one person or some municipal routine, the staff that we have inside the City Hall, look after these as a secretary for these meetings? So I noticed that right throughout the whole budget, every time there's a committee struck, $20,000 goes to some secretary to have a meeting, even if it's one meeting a year. That's wrong.
In our specific budget for Parks, Recreation and Culture, we have 2 of those committees that were established in 2010, and that's the Cultural Advisory Committee and the Sports Council. And, you know, the cost of good government is making sure that the committees have the appropriate levels of support to be able to do the important work and provide the advice that Council wants. And so staff looked at past practice on the existing committees that were struck and how much city resources were going into supporting those committees. And using that experience, they identified that about $5,000 of time for a city clerk to come to publish the meetings, take appropriate records of the proceedings, organize the meetings, takes about $5,000 of professional staff time to do that. And for the departments that had assigned liaisons to these advisory committees, that was costed at about $15,000 for staff to come to night meetings, to prepare information that the committees were requesting, and to support the important work that they were doing. So we felt that it was a good idea when Council was considering establishing additional committees to highlight what the operational impact was of this, and it was identified as being $20,000.
Well, you know, I'm not going to go any further. I don't want to carry on that, but to me it's totally out of proportion. But however, also, you know, today, earlier this morning, I was chastising Festival de Bois for their expenditure on the Festival de Bois, you know, $92,500. When times are tough, then maybe we should be cutting it. And here you are, a Canada Day celebration, $95,000 for one day. We need to consider these kind of things. It's taxpayers' money. Times are tough. You know, and do we apply to Heritage Canada to get a grant from them for July the 1st? No, we haven't. Have we applied ever?
Yes, we have. And Wendy Wiedrich can provide additional information about the budget breakdown for that $95,000 if Council wishes.
Well, it was approved by Council, so I'm having a bit of difficulty with the attack at this point, but that was a Council-approved expenditure,
yes.
I believe.
That's right.
Wendy,
I know
did you have
it
anything to
was.
offer? Nope. Nope. Okay.
Yeah, it was Council approval of expenditure, same as Festival de Bois. Was, you know, that's what I'm saying, that, you know, things are tight, things are tough, we should be being careful. And are we getting any money from Heritage Canada for July the 1st celebration?
Ms. Wiedrich.
Through the Chair, in 2009, the celebrations were funded through our Cultural Capitals of Canada designation through Heritage Canada. And in 2010, they again supported us through a grant for the Light Up the Night show, a portion of that. And we will be applying, and they have requested that we apply for our 2011 celebration should they continue to be funded.
So what was the total value of the money that they contribute towards?
In 2009, they fully funded the event through the Cultural Capital of Canada designation. So it was fully funded through the Heritage Canada, roughly $56,000. In 2010, they funded a component of the Light Up the Night show. I believe it was about $7,500. This year, we're applying for approximately $40,000 for the full fireworks component that we will be applying for.
And again, also the last one is Spirit Square event programming, $28,000. And you know, I know we built this thing, and the first year in that time that we had to spend some money. But sure, every year we're going to be now. It looks like we built a Spirit Square, and now we're going to try and put programs in there rather than the general public putting the programs in, and it's going to cost us $28,000. So. I just, you know, I feel that, you know, if times are tough, we need to cut. Some of these things can be cut even by 10, 15, 20%, you know, to help things along. That's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're a bit behind schedule now. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Laurie. The Poirier Precinct, all put together, fully operational and running, and a considerable change from what was there before. But in the documents that we have in front of us, there doesn't appear to be any significant budget impact. I would have expected perhaps we have integrated reception area, so we're selling tickets at one place instead of two. I've heard about Thermonex savings in that plant. But we also have more, I think, than we had before, so there are probably costs as well. But I would have expected to see some net change in our operating costs, operating up or down, probably up and down in a number of areas, but netting, miraculous if it nets out nil.
Thank you for the question, and indeed that topic has been the subject of a lot of detailed review all during the transition period, because every year, because it was a phased project, things were going up and down in the operating budget. And so you'll find in the detail, actually there was a 3-year plan around the budget, operating budget implications, where we were able to find efficiencies and savings, where we needed to do increases. You're absolutely correct. There's a significant increase in the amount of square footage that has to be maintained, but more efficiencies around the administrative areas and savings from Thermonex. And I'll look to Ms. Hare, because I believe in the binder there is the detail of the 3-year plan and what the incremental impacts on the operating budget are. Ms. Hare, do you have that detail available now?
Email me a page number.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor
Thank you, Your Worship.
And Councillor Lynch.
Thank you. I was wondering if we could return to the subsidy comparisons recovery rates. At first blush, there seems to be a fair fluctuation between the recovery rates of pools, arenas, and the outdoor sports. And I know recently we've had some inquiries again as to the difference in that. And I don't recall, I believe there was a rationalization presented before, but I don't recall the wide range of recovery rate from 11% for outdoor sports as opposed to the recovery rate of 66% or 60% for pools.
I'm going to ask Wendy if you can reference the historic sort of policy framework that has led to this, and in particular as it related to the elimination of fees for youth for our outdoor sports fields.
Through the chair, the outdoor sport recovery of 11% really is reflected that operation in parks is usually a free access. So the casual users don't pay a drop-in fee to come to a park. The only recovery ratio there is through the rental of sport fields. The elimination of the youth field fees, I guess, caused a further reduction, but really there was never a high recovery ratio for outdoor sports. Again, because unlike the indoor facilities where there's a mix of rental, casual use, or admissions for drop-in skates, as well as registered programs that go on there, their recovery ratios tend to be higher because it's more complex on that collection. So I believe the historical outdoor sport recovery rate was always around 25%, maybe 20, very, very low, and that's consistent throughout Metro Vancouver, throughout the province. Does that answer?
Yeah, I think that answers. It's just that we had some inquiries recently, so it seems to be if there's some type of a fixed building or something, then there's restriction to access, whereas when there's outdoor activities, it can be freely accessed. Is that correct? Sort of?
Yes, we've recently heard those sort of same kind of comments that if, my recreational pursuit happens to be indoors, I seem to have to pay a higher user fee than if my recreational interest is outdoors. So it does seem to be a topic that the public is interested in. I also believe in the history around the establishment of the policy around fees for the outdoor sports. There was an analysis done about how much it costs to collect the fees, particularly when you were dealing with large organized sports groups and they were issuing permits for every individual booking. That was quite costly for the city. And so it was a whole revamping exercise where instead the city would issue a block license to a group, and so it represented some savings to the city as well. So I believe this fee also meant to balance the costs to administer the program against the user fees.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just looking to arm myself because with this being a public presentation, I'm anticipating there's going to be a few questions. I just want to make sure I had the answers. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Reamer?
Thank you. With respect to your service reductions and closing the pools an hour early, just wondering, do we have any idea who uses the pools at that time of night? I'm suspecting that it's probably our young adult youth population, possibly. And so I have concerns with closing the pool an hour earlier if we are indeed accommodating those youth that may be out doing other things at that particular time of night. So Do we have any idea?
I'm going to look to Ms. Weidrich. We do know that that last hour of the day is the quietest time of the pool, but Ms. Weidrich, can you provide a profile of our users?
At the last hour of swims at both Chimo and CCAC are called our Toonie swims. They're a $2 swim that is frequented by adults predominantly. We actually don't see youth in at that time. So it would be affecting our adult users who traditionally get a lower cost opportunity in that last hour. That does drop off in the summer, and I believe the intention is to then drop that Toonie swim back an hour. So they would still be able to swim, just not as late, and it wouldn't impact our youth.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. One has to do with food services being contracted out at the new facility, and I'm just wanting to know where, one of the arguments for contracting out was in terms of cost savings, and with the idea that it would actually generate revenue, and I haven't identified that, or if I did, I missed it. Can you just speak to that a little bit in terms of what if anything, is it generated, and where we might see some of the cost savings, or did they get eaten up by larger facility needing more care or maintenance costs?
Thank you for the question. It is indeed a good news story for the city. We entered into an agreement with an operator to provide the range of services, and provided a period of time, an adjustment period while we're still under construction, where we weren't charging rent, and there was a threshold identified that once they achieved a certain amount of revenue, they wouldn't be paying a percentage, but once they got to that threshold, then we would start achieving 6% of that. And our projections were that that was really going to take us through the construction period and really to the end of the year. And I'm very happy to report that the operator has already exceeded that threshold, and we are already beginning to see our 6% on sales there. So we have exceeded the revenue projections there. The operator is very pleased, and the assessment is that we're providing a wider range of services to our user groups and at a lower cost to the city. And the revenue projections are reflected in the detail of our budget, which I know Ms. Hare could provide.
Ms. Hare.
Sorry. With respect to the budget submission to Councillor Nicholson's question, as well as your question for the Poirier Sport and Leisure Complex, in further review of the budget this year, you don't see an increase for consideration as operating tied to capital, because it actually has netted out. So with the food services considerations and where they've been able to achieve, as well as with better information around the Thermonex and all the related operating costs, it has essentially netted out to zero, offsetting. So with some of that increased revenue offsetting the expenditures.
Yeah, I'd actually like to see some of those details, because I think I was sort of expecting that would actually help in a much greater way, so I'd like to sort of see how that played out. Okay. That would be really helpful. I have a couple of other questions. One of them has to do with the one-time request for $85,000 for the increased maintenance that's related to the BC safety. And I'm just looking at the very specific budget report that's in our budget binders. And it's pretty clear that the request is for one temporary full-time area maintenance worker, with the idea that we could feasibly pass inspection as early as February 2011, and at which time we would no longer need this full-time. So it's an annual request, and it's noted as ongoing, but that's not the expectation. So I'm wondering why this would be in the base budget.
We're being very conservative in our budget. We can't control whether we will be risk assessed. If we are not, then we would have to continue, because of regulations, to continue to provide 24-hour coverage. So we're being very prudent in knowing that that is a risk. We're identifying what that risk is. If we don't have to do it, then we won't have to fund that.
Okay. My concern is that this is a little thing that would get lost and just go to something else. So I think that's going no way.
No, that's
okay.
Why we're particularly shining a light on that. We wouldn't expect that this would disappear. This is
Okay. I have one last question that, again, is related to some of the committee requests. And last year, if I recall, we had Spirit of Community Committee, I forget what it's called, and we had a Task Force Relay Committee. And the resources that we allocated to those committees last year that no longer exist, is what's happened with those resources, and why can't we use them to these other new committees?
That is something that can be done. Departments, on an ongoing basis, reallocate resources in order to respond to the work that's before us. At the time that these committees were struck, there were these existing committees that existed, and this department was involved in both of those, as well as the Multicultural Committee and the Disability Committee, and we were investing significant resources that really weren't identified. And other work was being put off in order to make those resources available. To add 2 more committees to that, you're beginning to get to a scale where you really do have to identify the resources in order to have it sustainable, or we would just have to stop doing things. And so at April, that was the reality, and again, it's prudent to identify those costs. Council has made it very clear that when it makes decision, it wants to know what the operating impacts are, and so we wanted to be very transparent that this additional work does represent resources that would have to be deployed. But you're right, things have changed since April. Some committees have concluded their business. Other committees now we have redistributed across the corporation so that other departments now are absorbing it into their work. So it is a very reasonable thing to take a fresh look at.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I wondered what the clerk was doing. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you.
Sorry, hang on a second, please.
Sure. It has been a question raised by a number of councillors, and I know that Ms. McLeod is preparing a series of responses to questions that have arisen over the last 2 days. But given this particular one, I thought I would point out that in those responses being prepared for you, we've provided a bit of history, about a 4-year history of committees struck and concluded, and including both standing committees and advisory committees, and just to show you some of the changes that have happened over time and costs that staff and clerks have and other business areas have absorbed and what has changed. And this document will provide a bit of that history, and that will be forthcoming. I was going to put it on the overhead projector, but it seemed to be a bit cranky. So,
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you, Mayor. So after, until they do a certain, the food end of it, until they do a certain volume, then above that you get the 6%. And the threshold is set at what level? Can you tell us?
I don't believe that the agreement is a public document at this time, but certainly the subject of the agreement, I believe, was discussed in camera with council.
Okay. Now tell me, then who replaces the equipment if they're worn out and the furniture? Is it us? We're responsible for replacement?
Part of the document.
I wonder if some of the specific details of the agreement might be deferred to an in-camera discussion.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Because to me, if you're charging 6% rent on a certain volume, that I can guarantee you that we're not making any money, that we're losing money, because there's the gas, the lights, the electricity. So frankly, I'll tell you what, outside of where we don't have the problems that we had before, where it cost us an arm and leg for labor, because we had our own labor in there, and we were losing all kinds of money. In here, we're losing money also. There's no two ways about it.
Perhaps I can suggest that I'd be more than happy to meet with Councillor Sikora to go over the business details of the arrangement, but I would like to give comfort that it is a very contemporary agreement and does represent a very good value and does use best business practice principles in that agreement. And again, our results already are showing that in previous years the city needed to subsidize hot dogs and beer, and now we are not subsidizing that. In fact, we are generating revenue that's offsetting taxpayer subsidy for these facilities. But I'd be more than happy to go for the details in confidence with Councillor Sikora.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Seeing none. We appreciate your presentation, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's the end of the formal presentations, and there are no other items on the agenda. Sorry?
One moment, please. I see Mr. Steblin.
Just to draw your attention to the last slide, it was highlighted that it would be discussed separately. I don't think we have to talk much about that. These are the 3 facility projects that Council has identified as priorities. Sheena has allocated block funding of in the order of $25 million, and that's all that there is in the funding envelope. That $25 million is not sufficient to fund all of these 3 projects, but you will be getting subsequent reports on all of them. And I'm not sure we need to discuss them now. We can discuss them on decision day in more detail if you'd like. But if you want more details, we can certainly talk about them now.
I assume that on decision day we'll have a range of potential costs for each one of those 3 and sufficient information on which to at least set a direction. Any other comments? I heard from Councillor Asmundson a motion to adjourn. Any seconded by Councillor Sikora. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.